construction project can have flawless engineering, rigorous geotechnical data, and pristine architectural renderings, yet still collapse into months of bitter commercial disputes during execution. This happens because of a widespread professional bias. Architects and engineers naturally rely on drawings to convey their design intent. The NEC3 contract, however, ignores intent and relies strictly on the structured text of the work's information. Looking at this wide exterior of King Shaka International, we see a massive, live passenger terminal. Executing an office fit-out inside this operational machine introduces severe constraints that must be forensically defined in the contract. Under NEC3, the supreme governing rule is Clause 20.1. It dictates that the contractor provides the works only in accordance with the work's information. If a requirement is not explicitly written in that specific document, the contractor is not obligated to perform it. Despite this absolute rule, project teams routinely make a fatal commercial error. They rely on the bill of quantities to define the scope of the project. The contract explicitly dismantles this practice in Clause 55.1. Clause 55.1 legally dictates that information in the bill of quantities is merely a pricing mechanism. It is strictly not works information, and it cannot be used to instruct work or mandate how it is done. If a specific material or performance requirement is listed in the Part C2 pricing documents, but omitted from the Part C3 works information, it legally does not exist as project scope. To prevent these exact failures, we have to forensically dissect how to structure works information. We will map out how to define responsibilities, enforce physical quality, and eliminate the loopholes that generate compensation events. Failing to properly author the works information transforms rigorous design into an unenforceable, costly wish list. Consider the blank geometric space of this project, the third floor of the office building. Before a single partition goes up, the formal contract must separate what currently exists from what is about to happen. On the left, we map the Part C4 site information, a strict factual description of the existing site. Inserting contractor instructions here is legally void. On the right, Part C3 works information is the single source of truth for new construction and exact execution rules. The works information dictates both the final physical geometry of the project and the specific methodology required to assemble it within the terminal. In an operational airport setting, these boundaries include heavily restricted security access rules and specific badging requirements for personnel, and designated working hours to prevent disruption to terminal tenants. Any execution scope buried in the site information is unenforceable. True commercial control requires locking every single performance constraint strictly within Part C3. Compiling works information requires formally mapping structural boundaries across disciplines, rather than just blindly uploading hundreds of pages of specifications. This table of contents provides the required architecture. It strictly compartmentalizes the data into specifications, drawings, performance requirements, operational constraints, and quality protocols. The constraints section of this document is particularly vital. It cages the contractor's working methods, forcing them to price and schedule their activities around the reality of the environment. This structural mapping becomes critical in multidisciplinary projects, where architectural finishes, structural engineering, and mechanical scopes inevitably collide. To resolve those collisions, the contract uses this interface schedule matrix. It explicitly defines where one party's responsibility ends and another's begins, like assigning design liability for temporary supports before ceilings are installed. When interfaces are left undefined, it leads directly to subcontractor disputes and work stoppages and critical path delays while the parties argue over whose scope a task falls under. A rigorous interface schedule acts as a preemptive legal shield. It eliminates the gray areas where scope gaps breed compensation events. We can see the commercial danger of failing to map details by examining temporary site hoarding. A vague specification stating contractor to erect temporary hoarding legally transfers the choice of methods and materials entirely to the contractor. The contractor, incentivized to protect their margin, installs the cheapest viable solution. The employer then attempts to reject the work based on unwritten expectations. Because the initial instruction was vague, instructing immediate upgrades after the fact is a guaranteed trigger for a compensation event. To firmly override contractor assumptions, the works information must embed a formal, high-standard specification manual, like this ACSA hoarding handbook. Contrast this with the exact technical requirements for Type A hoarding, explicitly mandating 16mm melamine boards, gray cambering finish, and 61mm galvanized floor tracks. Looking at this internal hoarding on site, we see the exact physical translation of those specifications, down to the vertical joint finish. Even the mandated physical hardware and specific access point signage are explicitly defined, leaving absolutely zero room for contractor interpretation. By dictating exact parameters, the legal dynamic shifts. Any physical deviation by the contractor is automatically classified as a defect that they must correct at their own cost. Replacing vague scope with exact materials and fixing methods entirely removes the contractor's ability to weaponize their own assumptions into a compensation event. Just as it dictates assembly, the works information must mathematically structure the inspection and handover process. The criteria for acceptance must be defined up front. The contractor needs to know the exact parameters the supervisor will use to test the work. This quality and testing matrix details every required test and certification. For King Shaka, it explicitly requires roof truss design approvals 30 days prior to erection and mandates physical hold points like a screed impact test before carpets are laid. Rigorous works information converts abstract design intent into an enforceable legal baseline. To audit your project documentation, apply this 5-point quality checklist before going to tender. First, are design responsibilities explicitly split in an interface schedule? Second, are all physical and access constraints housed correctly in Part C3, rather than buried in Part C4? Third, are all hold points clearly defined? Fourth, is the quality testing matrix complete? And fifth, is the scope entirely free of reliance on the Bill of Qualities? Applying this checklist determines whether a project will be managed by engineering rigor or managed by lawyers. Let's test the mechanics of these rules. Question 1. If a material is listed in the Bill of Quantities but omitted from the works information, is the contractor required to install it? No, per Clause 55.1. Question 2. Which document describes the existing physical condition of the site before work begins? That is the site information, Part C4. Question 3. Where must operational constraints, like terminal security rules, be legally housed? They must be in the works information, Part C3. Question 4. What is the primary purpose of an interface schedule? It is used to strictly map boundaries and design responsibilities between disciplines. And finally, Question 5. If a supervisor rejects a material that meets vague works information but fails unwritten employer expectations, what happens? It immediately triggers a compensation event. To master more NEC3 mechanics and protect your margins, subscribe to the channel and check out our full contract series.